Welcome back to Daily Dose of Hebrew. These are the weekend editions, and we're working through 1 Samuel 3 at a slightly slower pace than the regular videos. And today we're going to hone in on the accents of 1 Samuel 3:10. So let's read the Hebrew together and then get a translation under our belts before we jump into the accents. Let's read this together. We get Vayavo Adonai, Vayit Yatsav, Vayikra, Kefa'am Befa'am, Shemuel, Shemuel, Vayomer, Shemuel, Daber, Ki Shomea Avdecha. So now that we have the reading under our belt, let's look at the translation here, and we would have, and the Lord came and stood, or again, the Hithpael here is going to be and stationed himself, or he stood. And he called, and then this kefa'am befa'am is as a time in a time. That gets smoothed out as at previous times. And this is what he called Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant is listening." So now we've got all of that under our belts. Let's start breaking down the various phrases and clauses based on the disjunctive accents that we can see here. So first we want to find the heaviest disjunctive accents, and we always have the sof pasuk and the saluk together, as here. Now the next accent that we look for is the Athnach, and it's here. In prose narrative, the Athnach carries the same weight, we may say, the quote weight, as the saluk, but it is the far subordinate of the sof pasuk, and so it has more variance as to where it can land in the verse. The saluk has to fall on the word immediately preceding the sof pasuk, but the Athnach can move around in the verse. So now that we have the largest segments of the verse marked off, let's look at just the Athnach segment here. So now in the Athnach segment, we again want to look for a near and far subordinate accent. The near subordinate of the Athnach is the tifcha here. And remember, the tifcha occurs on the first or second word before the Athnach, and here indeed it is on the second constituent before the Athnach. Next, we find that the far subordinate of the Athnach, and it's the zakef katon in this case right here. Now I want to rearrange the verse slightly now so that we can see each of the segments separately. Now there are two more disjunctive accents to address here. One is the pashta here. Now the pashta is the near subordinate of the zakef, and since that segment is so short already, there's no need to break it down further with a far subordinate. So we use only the near subordinate of the zakef here. Now the pashta here marks off the initial verbal clause after its subject, Adonai, before moving on to the next verbal clause, and he stood. So you can see how that breaks off there. And the next accent to mention here is the legarma. The legarma is this combination of what looks like a munach conjunctive accent and then the vertical line that's associated with it, but that whole thing is the legarma. Now the legarma is an extremely weak disjunctive accent, but it does carry a slight element of break right here. In this case, the ever so slight break makes sense because we have in essence two vocatives together as the Lord calls to Samuel. If you call the name of your children to get their attention, you have to call twice, you very likely will pause slightly between the two vocatives. Here it's the same thing. So not a heavy break, but the legarma does give a slight break. So let's look at these segments now and translate them, and I think this translation can be a bit easier since they're broken into smaller and smaller segments. But let's do this together. And then the Lord came, and he stood, break, and he called as at other times, break, Samuel, slight break, Samuel. So now if we add the saluk segment back in, we can put the whole verse together. And we quickly add the near, or I want to quickly add the near and far subordinate accents to the saluk segment. One of those is the tifka here, and then the zakef here. So those are within the saluk segment, but I still want to mark those off. Notice also that the zakef segment has the near subordinate pashta, and it sets off the initial verbal clause from the imperative of Samuel's direct speech here. So now let's finish with a final translation of the whole thing. And the Lord came and stood, and he called, as at other times, Samuel, Samuel. Now we move into Samuel's speech, and Samuel said, Speak, for your servant is listening. Now that wraps it up for us today. I hope you enjoy that. I hope these are helpful. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, shalom.